$2 billion. Of that, roughly 1/4 of it is Medicaid, $300 million. It is the fastest growing program of the state budget. As I mentioned earlier, it's grown 68%. About 15,000 South Dakotans are now on Medicaid, including the Children's Health Insurance Program in that number. That's 1 in 8, more than 1 in 8. And the federal health care legislation would, depending upon whose estimate you take, add between 35,000 and 50,000 more South Dakotans onto the Medicaid rolls. It's something our state can't afford, it's something the nation can't afford, and so that's the reason I have opposed it.
You've opposed taking the Medicaid dollars. You didn't oppose that. You took $20.9 million in Medicaid money, only you didn't use it for Medicaid. You didn't use it for providers. We used it to make the budget look like it was healthier than it really is. That's what we did. It's interesting for me to listen to the Lieutenant Governor, because what he really says is nothing's going to change. If you elect him, nothing's going to change. The number of folks on Medicaid has grown, and oh, by the way, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. What I've tried to do in the past, starting in the 2007 session, was to study the problem of Medicaid so that we could introduce private sector queues to reduce the cost. All across the United States, different states are approaching the way we handle Medicaid caseloads differently. Kansas is one. North Carolina is one. These states are taking the challenge of handling the Medicaid caseload and reducing costs and improving efficiency. I don't know why South Dakota is so immune to that idea, but I can tell you, unlike the Lieutenant Governor, I'm not going to settle for things the way they are. You're going to see some changes.
Well, we have so many questions to get to. I want to move on the subject of health care. Where do you stand on the repeal of President Obama's health care reform legislation? Are you in favor of keeping any of the elements of the current program, and if so, which ones?
I do not favor the lawsuit that is currently pending that the Lieutenant Governor and this administration became a part of to repeal the health care reform proposal entirely. There are certainly parts of the plan, and as Governor of South Dakota, my job is going to be to implement the plan. It's not going to be to take a position and vote on the Congress of the United States. But I really look forward to the chance of working with the federal government on things like, for instance, pre-existing conditions, not disqualifying someone, a child, for instance, from receiving health care. The emphasis on preventative care, which I think is important and will save money, keeping people out of the emergency room and in preventative care situations. Those are good. But if you don't like the health care reform proposal that was passed by the Congress because you think it's too expensive, boy, you ought to come to Pierre with me sometime and I'll show you where expenses have gone up in the capital city, specifically with regard to state government. That's where the next governor needs to focus. That's where we need to reduce the size of government and the cost of government.
Mr. Dugan.
I do oppose the federal health care legislation, and I spoke out against it before its passage. I also support the Attorney General's lawsuit, where he's joined with many other states to oppose it on the grounds of the 10th Amendment. I do believe it's a bill that the state cannot afford and that the nation cannot afford. I guess I'm not surprised Senator Heideprim supports President Obama's spending policies in this area. He led the Obama for President campaign in South Dakota, so I don't blame him for feeling a sense of loyalty to the president. I do think it is something we cannot afford. The question about spending the Medicaid dollars, I think it's a misunderstanding about where those dollars came from. When the recession hit, the stimulus package gave 6 cents more of each Medicaid dollar to South Dakota. We had been paying 38 cents out of each dollar. We were given 6 cents more of the federal share. Now that share was that 6 cents additional money would shift back to our shoulders on December 31st, but for this legislation. This legislation said instead of dropping the 6 cents and shifting it to South Dakota on December 31, it eased us out by saying we'll give you 3.5 cents for the next quarter, January, February, and March of 2011, and then something less than that for April, May, and June, and then on June 30th. So to suggest that it's somehow a blank check of $20-some million, that's a lump sum, and that we're not spending on Medicaid is a misunderstanding. Senator Heideprim knows that.
Angela, could I just respond quickly? I mean, it's such a disappointment to hear this conversation degenerate the way the Lieutenant Governor just caused it to. The fact is, he again tells you nothing's going to change. Everything's going to stay the way it's been. And then he tries to nationalize the debate by bringing up Barack Obama as if somehow that's where I get my direction. Last time I checked, Lieutenant Governor, he's not voting in the South Dakota gubernatorial election. Last time I checked, you're a part of a lawsuit against the United States of America just because of this issue.
Yeah, I just want to offer one more comment.
Very quickly.
Well, Senator Ida Prim, if you think it's somehow wrong to sue the government, then I ask, why is your law firm representing the taxpayers through the school districts, spending taxpayer dollars to sue the state of South Dakota, for which we must expend taxpayer dollars to defend it? And what's the lawsuit request in the pleadings? When you initiated the pleadings, it requested that a judge rule that the state be ordered to spend $100 million more every year. If that's not spending where we don't have the money, I don't know what it is.
Angela, you've got to let me respond to that. All I want to say to you, Dennis, is I will never apologize for standing up for the kids and schools in this state. And if you'd stood up for them at any point in the last 8 years, there wouldn't be a need for a lawsuit.
All right, it's time for another quick break, but we still, as you can hear, have a lot to talk about. The candidates will answer your questions about open government when our KELO TV South Dakota gubernatorial debate continues. Well, there's been a shift toward open government in Pierre, but despite what some may call superficial efforts by the state legislature to open up things, state officials still appear to have a lot of secrets. Sarah wants to know how many times you've stayed at Valhalla Retreat in the Black Hills, under what circumstances. As governor, would you release the names of those who have stayed there in the past? And Scott wants to know if you think that it's right that Governor Rounds is the only person, a different Scott, who currently can decide who gets to stay there. So let's tackle Valhalla first, maybe the idea of open government. Do we really have open government now with these changes, not to close something, under the current legislation?
I think open government as a general topic has improved over the last 8 years. There was a recent legislative effort which passed overwhelmingly, in which the governor signed, which took our state law from a presumption of closed information, except where there were provisions that things be open, to a presumption of openness. Now, everything is presumably available unless there's an exception like personnel records or other kinds of trade secrets kinds of things where there would be closure. So as a general rule, I'd say open government has made good progress.
You want to quickly answer the question about Valhalla as well?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted open
well,
government.
Well, both, yes.
Okay. Valhalla, I've stayed at Valhalla, I think 4 times in the last 8 years. In each instance, Governor Rounds offered it to my family and I, and it was always our family that stayed there. We did not pay for it. Again, I did not know that Governor Rounds charged some people and others did not get charged. I thought it was his to use, much like his home. And I've stayed there 4 times. As I've said in the past, it's an historic treasure for South Dakota. It's on the National Registry of Historic Places. And I am open, Scott, I'm open to providing more access to the public, all the way up to allowing it to be rented like any other facility in Custer State Park. And
I will let you answer, but should we allow people to know then who's staying there, who's going on the governor's hunt, who's part of the Buffalo Roundup? Should we see those names? Should those lists be made public?
Yes, and in fact I've mentioned this to the Newspaper Association in their First Amendment committee. Those questions were asked. I'm on record on the Argus website in that regard, and I don't see any reason why those names can't be made public.
Okay.
In terms of open government, Angela, there's nothing more corrosive for a democracy than for an ordinary citizen to go into a courthouse or some other government office and ask to see a record and be told, well, who wants to know? Folded arms. I hope we're getting away from that. You know, we fought very hard, Nancy Turbeck-Berry from Watertown in '07 and '08, and finally in '09 we got the the majority party to agree with us, to move to a presumption of openness. We have a lot of work to do because there are an awful lot of exceptions to that presumption. As to Valhalla, I just think it's a really, it is a symptom of what's wrong with this administration.
And you stayed there.
I have. In 1994 or 5, Bill Janklow was the governor, so it would have been 95, I guess, and it was available for rent. And so my family and I rented it for a family reunion. It has 6 bedrooms. I think we paid $200 a night for a couple nights, and it was great. It was a wonderful setting for that. I don't see why we don't do that all the time. I don't see why we don't say, let's let the public rent Valhalla, take the money we make, and finally rebuild the sewer system at the Black Hills Playhouse, which was shut by this administration because it didn't have a functioning sewer. By the way, they spent $225,000 to fix up their own place, Valhalla. Now, it seems to me we should just treat it like Custer State Park or the Game Lodge or Sylvan. We rent treasures out all the time and take the money and put it in the Game Fish and Parks budget. Let's do it again. Let's make some money on it.
Mr. Dugard said he would be willing to release lists of those that go in the Buffalo Roundup.